So next up, we have Hope and Delia from the Environmental Finance Center, and they're going to be talking to us a little more specifically about the work that they do, but also, again, related to water.
Great, thank you. Hi everyone, I'm Hope Thomson, and Delia and I are going to talk to you about some things that we do at the Environmental Finance Center, or the EFC for short. So specifically, we're going to be talking about utilities, their financial health, and customer affordability programs. So I meant to bring up my timer, but I'm just going to try to keep it as under 5 minutes, and then I'll pass the buck to Delia. So at the EFC, we know that paying for environmental services and protections is challenging. The cost of doing so is rising over time, and the folks who are paying for them are facing financial pressure from a lot of different angles. So whether it's increasing water quality at a regional reservoir, or a homeowner who's trying to weatherize their home, or maybe a local government that wants to upgrade their 50-year-old treatment plant, we're often asking the question of who's going to pay for this, where's the money going to come from, and how will paying for these services impact the individuals, communities, and governments that are paying for them. You can slice this a bunch of different ways. So there's a lot of different strategies to do this. I am still learning all of them, honestly. The EFC has had a long, multi-decade history of doing this kind of work. But we're often talking about individuals paying a rate or a tax. So here you can see from Jones County Water Department, a water bill, something that some of you might be familiar with, paying directly for getting water into your tap. Communities might pay differently depending on which environmental protections or services they are benefiting from or need to contribute to. And then governments, we work a lot with local governments, might be using their general fund, other fees and taxes, or getting grants and loans from state or federal or private sources. So we're usually talking about small utilities, sometimes under 10,000, 1,000 customers. And we focus a lot on water. So drinking water, wastewater, and stormwater. There's certainly other kinds of environmental services that need to be paid for in our state and across the country. These are provided by infrastructure, right? We don't just get water out of the ground if you're getting it from a utility. It has to go through treatment processes, and it has to be delivered to your home. And this is really challenging for especially small systems like we work with, because this infrastructure is really quite expensive. This is a dated graph. It's from 2005, but I would guess that this has only become more severe. So focusing on that blue bar, these are municipal water systems, and they have to put in $7.03 into capital. So that's like upfront infrastructure costs of borrowing money, to get $1 of generated revenue back. And it's easy to dismiss that, but remember that revenue is going towards their materials, supplies, their personnel, salary, and benefits, the people who are running the plant, sending you your bill, all that kind of stuff. So being able to generate sufficient revenue to run your utility is really important. And Greg just talked a little bit about how those revenues changing over time can be really challenging for planning purposes. This is certainly a problem that we face in North Carolina. We have almost 500 local government-owned water and wastewater utilities as of 2018. We know that some of these are big, right? City of Raleigh, New Hanover, Durham, Owasso. But a lot of these are really small communities that are just trying to deliver these services that are protective of the environment and of public health to their local communities. And they often are struggling to do so. It's tempting to say, well, let's just change this, or let's just change this policy, and everything will kind of wash away. But there's a lot of competing priorities for these utilities. I'm actually only going to bring out the bottom two. So local politics is one that we run into a lot. You might know what is the best strategy or internal policy to implement for your utility, but it's really unpopular at the ballot box. So it doesn't actually happen. And then regulatory requirements. So for good reasons, there are stringent standards that these utilities have to meet to protect public health and the environment, but they're challenging to meet. So they can't just slash and burn their budgets willy-nilly. They have to be able to maintain those standards over time. When we're seeing a utility that's struggling, we often suggest a rate increase might be one way to generate sufficient revenues to cover management of the utility, but we know that that can be really challenging, especially for low-income customers. And this is where this affordability question comes up that Delia is going to speak more about. Here in Chapel Hill, we are not a stranger to this. So this graph is showing water and wastewater at 4,000 gallons of consumption in Chapel Hill. And just focus on those 3 red bars. Those are folks in our town who are making less than $25,000 a year. They're spending upwards of 4, 7, and 11% of their annual income on their water and wastewater bill alone. So no rent, electricity, internet, food, none of that. This is just water and wastewater. And a lot of utilities know this is a problem, right? We know that's not sustainable for individuals or for families. And so the way that we can try to start to proactively address this affordability issue is through something called a customer assistance program. And so Delia is going to talk a little bit about our work researching caps and trying to recommend some best practices.
Awesome. Thank you, Hope. So I'm going to be talking about how, like Hope said, we can address affordability with caps. So what is a cap? A cap is a customer assistance program, and it's used by water and wastewater utilities to make bills more affordable for customers and also prevent water cutoffs. And a cutoff is what happens when a customer does not pay their bill after a certain amount of time or a certain level of cost. The utility will have to come out and shut off their water. And when that happens, it's a really big deal because then you can't cook, you can't take a shower, you can't even drink water out of your tap. So even for one day, this can be really scary and tough for a family. And so these caps usually target low-income customers. And they can do this in several ways. For example, there could be a long-term bill discount program or even a temporary payment to help prevent a water cutoff. And you see on the chart, bill discounts are the most popular type, but the type of cap that a utility implements really depends on the legality of funding caps in their state. Washington State, I believe, is the only state that explicitly allows a utility to implement a cap with their rate revenues and to charge different rates to different customers. In North Carolina, they explicitly don't allow utilities to do this, so they have to charge the same rate to every customer, even though, like in the chart that Hope showed, that's a very different impact for different customers at different levels of income. So OWASA, our local water and sewer authority, does have a cap. It's called Care to Share, but they can only provide temporary assistance. They can't provide long-term bill assistance because North Carolina law prevents OWASA from discounting rates for certain customers. So they must raise their funds through donations and distribute them through the IFC, which is a local nonprofit. So something that me and Hope were looking into this semester is how OWASA could potentially implement a better cap if these legal barriers didn't exist in North Carolina. So one of the most innovative models that we found is used in Philadelphia and Baltimore, and it's this income-based billing model. So for low-income customers who qualify, their monthly water and sewer bills can be limited to just 2 to 4% of their household income. And if you look at the chart, there are a lot of different things that a household has to pay for every month. And even just under that utilities category, it's hard to see, but it's not just water and sewer. There's also internet, gas, electric. So there's a lot of bills that a household has to manage, and if they're spending 10% of their income on just water and sewer, it can have a really difficult impact on them being able to pay for everything else. So this model is great because it prevents that from getting out of hand and from them paying more than 2 to 4% of their income. But unfortunately, this is not something that we can do in North Carolina at this time. Another best practice that we found was actually right next door in the city of Durham. They conducted this human-centered design project, and they revised their cutoff warning letter to use plain language and clear directions on what to do next when a customer is facing a potential water cutoff. So if we look at this, it might be kind of hard to see, but the letter on the left is the original cutoff letter, and what it says is, your payment must be received in our office by 5 p.m. on the last business day prior to the disconnect date, which is like, what does that mean? Like, what is the last business day? Your payment must be received. Like, why am I even getting this letter in the mail? So they revised it to the one on the right that says, if you do not pay or contact us by 5 p.m. on June 23rd, your water will be shut off on June 24th. So this provides a really clear directive to the customer. This is what you have to do by this certain time or else your water will be cut off. So a simple change like this doesn't require them to charge different rates to different customers and is something that OWASA could do right now that's legal under North Carolina law. And even though it doesn't provide a direct financial benefit to customers, it does help them understand what's happening and how they can prevent their water from getting cut off. So some of our initial conclusions from this research would be to add a long-term bill discount customer assistance program. Unfortunately, they can't do this right now, but ideally this would help those families who have all these different costs to balance, but not a lot of income to go around. But something they could do right now is use plain language and clear directions in their cutoff warning letter, like we saw from the City of Durham.
Thank you all so much. So do we have questions for either Greg or for Hope and Delia, or both? Yes.
Is there any movement to like change that law that requires North Carolinians to all pay the same for their water bill? Like any political action?
That's a great question. I'm not aware of like any active campaigns to try to change that statute, but we were just saying that if people are like really interested in that, that would be a good thing for us to research further to see what kind of organizations are advocating for affordability. Yeah, great question. We don't know, but we can try to find out.
Steve Wall.
Greg mentioned the paper that he and Hope just had published. Greg, can you give us like a 30-second summary of the paper?
Sure. So when a hurricane strikes, there's usually two numbers you get out of it. You get how much of the damage was insured and how much of it was uninsured. And so Hope spent a lot of time with a number of other colleagues in our group trying to figure out what sort of risks might be hidden, financial risks. And amongst those were increasing the potential for mortgage default, which then these are risks that accrue to lenders, and increasing the risk of home abandonment. The risk accrues often to municipal governments who are then responsible for maintaining or demolishing the homes. And so if you aggregate those up from one event, which was Hurricane Florence, the potential risk, these are not the losses, we need to be able to do a little bit more work to translate those risks into losses, but they came out to about $500 million. And so a substantial amount when you consider that insured losses were only $300 million. So it was work that's caught on with a couple of other groups. It seems to be a hidden risk that people haven't recognized or certainly been able to quantify before, but one that needs to be managed more effectively. So, Hope, how close to you?
Really good, yeah.
Cindy.
I have a question for Greg. You gave the hydropower example, and there's huge and growing demand for long-term intermittent storage with more renewables coming onto the grid. Is there a renewed look at pumped storage for hydro facilities, and could that address both the energy storage and the revenue variability, or is it like when you plumb a building, you do it at the beginning or you don't do it at all?
So I think there are a lot of people looking at pump storage for exactly the reason that you mentioned, right? The increased intermittency in the system because of the variability in solar and wind power make the compensatory value of hydropower that much greater until we get cost-effective battery storage, right? And so there are a lot of people looking at that. How that translates into the financial risks associated with drought, my guess is it'll actually increase the financial risk to hydropower producers over time because they're going to have very high valuations for their generation in times when we see low solar or low wind output, and then perhaps very low valuations during the times when we have plenty of it. And so while it's a useful tool, I think we'll see bigger swings in the revenues, revenue generating potential for those, and thus even more impetus for trying to come up with ways to manage that risk.
All right, there are three hands there, and we have time for one more question. Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. I don't have any questions regarding the actual content of the presentations, but I have a flight to catch, so I just wanted to get my question off. As an admitted student who's not doing any majors related to sustainability, I was just wondering if some of the professors in the room can let me know how I can get involved with movements on campus.
That's a really long answer. You have all the people here who will advocate for all the great things that are going on, but I'll summarize in saying there's no shortage of choices within the College of Arts and Sciences, within the business school, within the School of Public Health. There are so many different choices. You need to reach back out to us and we can provide you with a lot more background than we can give you in 1 minute. that we have left. But thank you for coming,
Yes.
and we'll see you in the fall, for certain, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.